Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for this week's ChangeNerd webcast. Our guest today is Colin Mulholland. Colin is an experienced OCM practitioner with great experience in education environments, all the way from startups to Fortune 100 companies. Colin, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for having me. Excited to be here and definitely believe in the community that you're building. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, man. I've been trying to get you on this webcast for a while, so I'm glad we could actually find time. And me and you before this webcast, just so that the community knows, like me and you, we communicate, pretty often and have had several calls around, the future of change management. I think this is a very timely topic as we enter 2020. But before we get into the content, let's learn about your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am from Atlanta, Georgia. I work for Change Healthcare. We are a healthcare technology company, and I get the opportunity to work with our leaders throughout the enterprise that are undergoing large-scale transformations in the business to keep up with evolving market, as well as enterprise change initiatives like the ERP systems or the HRIS systems. What I have a passion for is the people side of transformation. I'm excited that the 2020 will start leading us toward more human ways of working.
Yep.
Start challenging things that likely needed to be disrupted for some time. So excited to be here and definitely excited to continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to do like a kind of top to bottom approach to this whole conversation around the future of change management, what are some of the macro trends that are impacting organizations today? What's your perspective?
Yeah, I think there's several. The ones that kind of come to mind is the speed of knowledge. So it's no longer the smartest person in the room. It's
Yep.
the individuals that are able to take that knowledge and apply it. So social skills are starting to become more desirable and needed to interact with teams. The ability to communicate quickly globally, across company lines, but also across country lines, is just evolved very rapidly with the internet getting to where it is. And then I think from a employee experience and a customer experience standpoint, the social media megaphone, as it's referred to, right? No one buys a product without looking on Google to see how many stars it is. And if the experience isn't going well, it's likely that someone's going to hear about it. And that didn't used to be the case, but I believe there are some positive trends coming out of those three components.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. Things are shifting. You're absolutely right. And from a corporate perspective or organizational perspective, how do you see organizations, or what are your thoughts on how organizations are actually responding to these types of trends?
Yeah, so industries differ. My friend Matt's on the phone, friend and mentor, spent 32 years at Clorox company, and brought me into this culture work about 18 months ago. But we have conversations frequently with organizations understand that culture is important. They understand that change will continue to be the norm. And I believe the what to do isn't yet figured out. And that's exciting time to be in the space that we live in, right? Where there's new themes and new ways of working that are being experimented and determined to be best fit. So I think it's exciting. I don't think there's a silver bullet solution, right? We're dealing with humans, and I think too often in the past, there were solutions that had a destination. So folks knew the answer and they just had to work harder or be more efficient. And that's no longer the case. They're very complex environments that we live and work in. And being okay going in a directionally correct space is important, because there's no specific answer. We need to make sure that we're directionally correct, and then we're engaged with both our customers and our employees with feedback loops that make sense for the pace of which work is delivered today.
I love that. I love that, because if you think about change management, project management, traditional ways that teams go about implementation, we're focused a lot of times on a certain methodology or a certain framework. And I think what you're saying is we have to think more broadly, considering both the customer and the employee experience at the same time, which is like a radical shift, right? So here it is. Not only is it a radical shift, but kind of the infrastructure that's in place today in society is, as far as like how we groom and educate practitioners, we're not talking enough about like customer and employee experience. So like I love being, you were talking about this, I actually put it in the advertisement. You were talking about how change management today is like table stakes. So tell us more about that. Or it should be.
Yeah, so I think it should be table stakes, right? Because for folks that live in the space, it seems that these are things, let's be specific about it, right? That most leaders should be responsible for. If you are going to guide a team through a objective, first you co-create a shared vision.
Co-create, yep.
You align goals. So it's not just one person's idea that they push amongst folks, right? It's this, you bring folks to the conversation that are going to be impacted by the change, so that there's less resistance once it's rolled out. So from the co-creation, then you embed continuous feedback. So this whole notion of creating a robust communication plan that takes 45 days to get all the stakeholders engaged, the R&D folks are delivering on 2-week sprints. By the time you communicate the first time, they will have delivered 4 sprint cycles. So by the time you communicated the first time, the product's already evolved.
Yep.
And I think there's more of the product development space seems to be doing this well, but I think it's our obligation to our people, both the customers and the employees, to ensure that the people are a part of that design, so that we're looking at measurables such as voice of the customer, voice of the employee. We're assessing sentiment on a regular cadence, and not just to force people to do what we told them to, but shaping things more toward value and less toward activities. So we're assessing inputs that lead to outputs, as opposed to just saying, yeah, well, we communicated via email once about this vision. It's not likely that someone's going to prioritize your work if they don't believe in it. So how do we involve them earlier on in the process? And I think it's blending what we've arbitrarily boxed into things that necessarily didn't deliver value, but it was comfortable.
Wow, you said so much. That's awesome. No, I love it. So Colin, what would be some tactical recommendations? Because you said a lot. The reality is the way we show up to the business as OCM practitioners or project managers, HRBPs, whatever. The way we perform things, do our work, it is moving somewhat slow, right? You're talking about a communication plan, and right, with communication plans within organizations, there's some level of governance, has to be reviewed by X amount of people, and that's if we decide to take that formal route. But what are some tactical steps that teams can actually leverage to move at the speed of business? Right? If you're working with a product team or a project team that's moving at a 2 to 3 week sprint, like what are your thoughts? How do they overcome that hump?
Yeah. So I am moving toward this idea that rhythms are much more important than Gantt charts. So project plans are important, right? Things need to be delivered on time to meet certain expectations of the organization. However, there's also this opportunity to start with these weekly or bi-weekly rhythms, work with what the organization believes to be the cadence that we need to engage both our customers and our employees. So design thinking is talked about frequently, but within design thinking, there's empathy interviewing. So you show up to both your customer and to your employee base. And with a small team, you can conduct 20 to 24 interviews, which is the law of diminishing returns.
Yep.
So you have these conversations to inform whether or not it's even the right thing to be doing. I feel like too often we're fighting this resistance battle, either as change practitioners or leaders, because the strategy stinks. Like, change management doesn't help a bad strategy work.
It doesn't.
So at the beginning of it, right, if we're engaged with the people, the customer, and the employee to say, this is directionally where we're headed. This is what we believe to be important. It's going to impact you. What are your thoughts? And having a set of questions to get macro themes to inform the process. And keeping there, we had a leader here that was a part of our ERP financial systems integrations. And he said it needs to start as communication and it needs to turn into engagement.
Yeah.
And it's not how we often think about communication in corporate America. We think about communication as one way, or even if folks think they're good at it, it's a two-way communication.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think of everything to tell you, and then you tell me what you thought about what I told you. But you never had the option to inform what we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of words. I'd say it's most important to have continuous rhythms, both with your employees and your customers. Focus on co-creation. It might be uncomfortable. It might not be the way that you make decisions. Iterate the solution and continue to tell people how you incorporated or didn't incorporate their feedback into the design. And then hopefully where you'll get to is that the cultural norm is trust and transparency. And then it doesn't matter what project you're delivering on. If people believe you and they trust you, anything can be accomplished. I feel like oftentimes we get too narrow-minded on that short-term deliverable on a project, and we stop thinking about change as a capability of interacting with humans to deliver value.
Yeah, I love that. So for me, the narrative that I want to push in 2020 is that 2020 is the year of community. For individuals as far as learning is concerned, but also within organizations. Like, and it doesn't have to be as formal as creating a community of practice, but more so just trying to foster somewhat of a community between different teams and departments that need to work together to deliver on a particular goal, right? Because I love what you're saying as far as, you know, creating a rhythm or some type of pattern of information sharing, because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, right? And understanding directionally where you want to be and making sure that the people who are impacted are allowed to contribute to the thought process. And then, like you said, go back to them and let them know how they were able to, how their feedback was able to influence the plan, or if for whatever reason the executives had to make a call and your feedback wasn't allowed in. So it's really foster, and it doesn't. So here it is, right? So this is the cool thing about it, and I hope as many people watch this conversation as possible, because this is free, by the way, right? This is free. A lot of companies already have Microsoft Teams, Yammer, Slack. Like, a lot of the infrastructure is already in place to start building this type of, community focused transformation, if you will, where you're having people share information and everyone's getting at the right time so that they can contribute and things of that nature. It just needs to happen, right? Like,
yeah.
Does this make sense?
And yeah, I'm completely tracking with you. I think about how we got connected at the beginning of this year on LinkedIn, how I'm now engaged with Jason Little in Canada, who's a thought leader in the space.
Yep.
There's folks in Australia that have been thinking about these ways of working that are a little bit further along than where we currently are. And there's a phrase that I use frequently where it's just invest in yourself. And it's that opportunity to leverage community, not so that one person can be right and another person can be wrong, or that someone's viewed as an expert. I refuse to be considered an expert, because an expert is someone you go to for all the answers. I just hope that we provide enough value that folks are able to push the dialogue forward.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in the future of open communities, right? This, whether it's software development or just Wikipedia, these things that are so human that it says, hey, how about encyclopedia is going to go broke and we're going to crowdsource information sharing and we'll pay a couple people, and it blows up. Yeah. Because humans are innately communal and they are adaptable to their environment. But if we continue to idolize our tools and our information and hoard it so that it's only to our greater good, that individual will be limited in the future of work. They'll be limited to just their practices, and they'll be beat because there's people iterating in this communal space, because like we said at the beginning, like information is being shared much faster than it ever has before. It's your ability to apply it. It's your ability to empathize with customers and employees, to enhance trust, and to deliver results, not for stakeholder or for shareholders' sake, but because that's what humans were built to do. Yeah. To deliver against goals together, survive, right? But like,
exactly.
I think that's so exciting.
I love it. So Colin, if this is now what the future of change in organizations is really going to be focused on, this idea of creating community, creating some type of way for information to be shared to the right people at the right time, what are some of the implications to things like leadership development, succession planning, other infrastructure-based programs that support people within organizations? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think it all becomes integrated at some point, right? It is no longer that we solely rely on single points of failure. Like if our leadership development isn't good enough, our leaders aren't going to develop. It's not the case, right? Like folks are branching outside of their corporate walls to engage in these types of sessions, right? To be able to opt in to communities outside of the confines of showing up to a 9-to-5. And I think that's powerful. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to land. I think that learning will always be a equalizer. Your ability to problem solve, regardless of where you live or the current circumstances that you're moving through, your ability to problem solve and learn and build relationships will solve for most problems. And an inability to do that will create more divide.
Yeah. So Colin, we're moving towards the end of this webcast. Is there any additional thoughts that you want to put out there about the future of change within organizations?
Yeah. I'd say be open to it. Don't let what's outside of your control limit what you're capable of accomplishing. Whether you're a one-person team or you're undergoing vast amounts of change. My dad's on the phone here, and there's a lot that I learned from him about some intangibles, right? And there's this ability to show up when the time's tough, mm-hmm. to be persistent about what you believe in, and be willing to make relationships and fight for what you feel like is worth it. And if you lose or you struggle, that shouldn't define you if you stood for what you believed to be valuable. So I'd say show up when the times are hard, show up when the times are hard, be open to learning from everyone, and stand for something.
Yeah.
Like fight for people that are trying to lead through these new spaces, whether it's customers and employees, build relationships. And I believe that 2020 is going to be an awesome time to be in change. Just be open to considering new ways of working as you're moving into it.
Awesome. Colin, great advice. This has been a fantastic time with you, and we want to be mindful of your schedule as well. So thanks so much. How can people in the community find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me. I'm in the community in ChangeNerd. You can send me an email, however you want to reach out, but LinkedIn's usually the best. Would love to connect with more people that are exploring this space. Love talking about how do we move toward a more advisory focused change as opposed to an execution level change. And definitely excited about what 2020 has to bring for folks like you and I, Brian.
Absolutely. All right, Colin, thanks again.